The system. Evan McCann. Caane walked through the lightly falling snow, hands stuffed deep into his jacket pockets, feeling the chill nip at his cheeks. Ahead, Aidan's house came into view, aglow with twinkling Christmas lights and vibrant holiday decorations. For a brief moment, he could almost pretend everything was the same as it had always been. Their group back together after months apart, ready for a night of board games, hot cocoa, and Travis's endless stories. As he stepped through the front door, the warmth of the house enveloped him, along with the inviting aroma of freshly baked cookies. Aidan, tall and broad-shouldered with short brown hair that was always slightly tousled, was in his usual spot, hunched over the coffee table in the living room. He meticulously arranged the game pieces with laser focus, his hands moving with the precision of a skilled blacksmith forging a weapon. "Caane! Good to see you, man!" Aidan called, glancing up for just a moment. His voice was steady and confident, a comforting constant amidst the holiday chaos. "Good to be home," Caane replied, kicking off his shoes. He wandered into the kitchen where Julius, his dark hair tied back in a casual man bun, wore an ugly Christmas sweater that made him look even more relaxed than usual. He was pouring steaming mugs of cocoa, the warmth radiating from the mugs adding to the inviting atmosphere. "Want one?" Julius asked, sliding a mug toward him with a grin. His face lit up as he dove into a story about a recent hike, the thrill of adventure dancing in his bright eyes. "You wouldn't believe the view from the top. It was like I was on top of the world, but then..." "You got lost, right?" Caane interrupted with a teasing smirk. "I mean, that's your thing." Julius laughed, rolling his eyes. "Okay, fine, I did, but you should have seen me. I was like, I can totally find my way, and then..." "You didn't?" Aidan chimed in, finally looking up from his game setup, a playful smirk on his face. "Exactly!" Julius chuckled, pouring another mug for Aidan as he joined them. No. In the cozy living room, Michael, blonde and clean-cut, sat on the couch, flipping through the game's rulebook with furrowed brows. His serious demeanor, accentuated by his neatly combed hair, seemed even more pronounced as he scanned every detail, ensuring everyone understood the rules before they dove in. "Do you think we should read through this again?" Michael asked, his tone earnest. "I want to make sure we don't overlook anything important." "Relax, Michael. It's just a game," Travis said, leaning against the armrest, a cheeky grin spreading across his face. With his short, dirty blonde hair and a mischievous glint in his eye, he was the embodiment of playful chaos. "But I can't wait to see how it plays out. Remember the time I accidentally set the lab on fire? And then the whole lab just whoosh up in flames," Travis continued, his hands animated as he recounted the tale. "Not real flames, obviously, but you should have seen their faces. The professor looked like she'd seen a ghost." Caane smiled, his attention drifting to the half-assembled game on the table. There was something comforting about being back here with these people. Aidan was always the one making sure everything ran smoothly. Julius brought the fun, Travis added chaos, and Michael tried to keep order. It felt like they'd never left high school, despite the 3 years since and the different paths life had taken them. As they settled in, each waiting for Aidan to finish setting up, a sudden flicker interrupted their laughter. The lights dimmed for a brief moment, and Caane's heart skipped a beat. The house felt as if it was tilting, the air thick with an unexpected tension. "Did you guys see that?" Caane asked, his voice barely above a whisper, eyes darting to the others. Before anyone could respond, everything went black as Caane blinked into nothingness, feeling solid ground beneath his feet, but no longer in Aidan's house. The world around him was void, empty, yet not cold or menacing, just vast. He tried to speak, but realized his voice wasn't coming out. A soft light appeared in front of him, a translucent window hovering in the air. Base stats? Strength 10. Dexterity? 10. Constitution? 10. Endurance? 10. Intelligence? 10. Willpower? 10. Wisdom? 10. Charisma? 10. His heart raced. These stats, they looked just like the ones from the MMORPGs he and his friends used to spend hours playing, except now they were real. Maybe some, I'm freaked out, or this is cool, or something to bridge the real world to this gap. The window shifted, offering him a choice. Choose a class. Warrior, heavy armor, receives +1 STR and +1 free stat per level. Warrior, light armor, receives +1 STR and 1 free stat per level. Archer receives +1 dex and +1 free stat per level. Rogue receives +1 dex and +1 free stat per level. Priest receives +1 wise and +1 free stat per level. Mage receives +1 int and +1 free stat per level. Bard receives +1 char and +1 free stat per level. Monk receives +1 will and +1 free stat per level. Caane hesitated for only a moment. He remembered how often he'd played as a mage in their old games, always eager to delve into the arcane arts, fascinated by the limitless potential of magic. He could still hear Aidan teasing him for being the glass cannon of the group. With a faint smile, he selected mage. As soon as he made his choice, the void around him shimmered with energy, and a new sensation coursed through him. Unfamiliar, yet thrilling. Power, raw and untamed, as if he had just opened the door to a part of himself that had always been waiting to be unlocked. Suddenly, the void around him shimmered, and Caane felt the power within him start to stir, the sensation so overwhelming it felt like the very air around him had shifted. The space around him warped, the darkness peeling away like a veil, and in an instant, Caane was no longer floating in the abyss. Blinking against the sudden burst of light, Caane found himself standing in a small, unfamiliar town. The ground beneath his feet was solid again, made of cobblestone, and the air was crisp with the scent of something fresh and new, yet tinged with the earthiness of wood smoke. He glanced around, disoriented, trying to get his bearings, when a calm, neutral voice spoke, echoing in his mind. Welcome! While Earth and its wildlife is being transitioned, you and all other sapient beings have been sent to tutorial planes. Earth will be ready for habitation in 1 month. In the meantime, learn, adapt, and grow. And the words echoed like a proclamation, and Caane's heart raced. Tutorial planes, what had happened to Earth? His mind buzzed with questions, but the world around him seemed indifferent to his confusion. Looking around, he noticed the town itself was simple, but structured. 4 roads extended from the center in each cardinal direction. To the south, he could just make out wide rolling plains stretching far and open. To the east, the shimmering surface of a distant lake caught the light, its gentle waves sparkling under the sun. In the west and north, a thick forest dominated the horizon, its dense trees creeping towards a distant, snow-capped mountain that rose like a sentinel into the sky. Towering in the far northern woods, its peak glowing faintly in the sunlight. The town's buildings, all neatly arranged, appeared to be shops, each with living quarters stacked above them. To his left, a sturdy inn stood, its wooden sign swinging gently in the breeze. And to his right, a temple rose with a modest spire, its stone architecture suggesting a place of quiet refuge. As Caane slowly turned to take everything in, he spotted a fountain at the center of the square, its water trickling softly. Around it, clusters of people, most looking as disoriented as he felt, stood or wandered, all dressed in varying outfits, clearly not from the world they once knew. His gaze swept over them until it landed on something familiar. He couldn't help the smile that tugged at the corner of his mouth. His friends had appeared, each one dressed in exactly the kind of garb Caane had half expected but couldn't quite believe until now. Aidan was the first one he saw, standing tall and steady, dressed in a simple steel breastplate that shone under the sunlight, a leather kilt with studded edges completing the look. In one hand, he gripped a broad shield, and in the other, a steel arming sword, its blade glinting with readiness. His face, a mix of surprise and excitement, mirrored Caane's thoughts. Next, Julius, always the calm observer, was scanning the town with a careful eye, dressed in a sleek leather chest piece and bracers, a quiver slung over his shoulder. The bow in his hand looked well worn, as though it had been his weapon of choice for years. There was a gleam in his eyes that told Caane his friend was already planning their next move, even in this strange new world. So Travis stood nearby, slightly crouched as if ready to spring into action at any moment. His black leather breastplate blended into the shadows, a hood attached to his outfit, casting a slight shadow over his mischievous grin. A short sword hung from his belt, and his eyes flickered with amusement. Then there was Michael, stumbling slightly as he appeared. He wore cream-colored robes, plain and simple, yet they seemed to radiate a quiet strength. In his hand, he clutched a staff, its wood smooth and polished, and he looked down at it, brow furrowed, as if unsure of what to do with it, his expression serious as ever. Caane glanced down at himself and let out a soft chuckle. He was dressed in gray wizard's robes, plain clothes underneath, a wand hung from his belt, light but humming with energy. The fabric of his robe was comfortable, though he could already imagine Travis's teasing remarks. And sure enough, Travis broke the silence with a snicker. Well, look at you two. Caane, you're one bad spell away from turning into a comic book wizard, and Michael, nice staff? You planning to preach the virtues of fireballs? Neither Caane nor Michael responded, their stoic silence causing Travis's grin to widen. But before Travis could press further, Aidan's voice broke through. Dude, this is awesome! Aidan's eyes were wide with awe, his grin splitting across his face as he looked around. His enthusiasm was contagious, and for a moment, Caane's unease faded. Despite the oddness of their situation, there was a thrill in the air, an adventure waiting to unfold. Around them, a crowd of close to 500 people had gathered, likely the people from their surrounding neighborhoods, all teleported here just like them. The square was abuzz with voices, some confused, others excited. Caane exchanged a quick glance with his friends, and they all seemed to silently agree on their first course of action. Let's find our families first and meet up at the tavern afterward, Julius suggested, his hand resting on his bow, still surveying the area. The others nodded in agreement before heading off in different directions. Caane made his way through the crowd, weaving between people who were either reuniting with loved ones or wandering in bewilderment. After a few minutes of searching, he spotted his family near the temple, deep in conversation. His father, Stephen, stood with his usual calm and analytical demeanor, his arms crossed as he spoke quietly to his wife, Linda. Caane's mother, ever patient, nodded thoughtfully, her eyes scanning the crowd for familiar faces. His sister, Sarah, looked restless, her arms folded, foot tapping as though she were ready for action. Caane! Linda exclaimed, spotting him first. She rushed forward, pulling him into a warm hug. Thank goodness, we were worried. No. Yeah, about time you showed up, Sarah added, though her smile took the edge off her words. Her warrior's garb, a leather jerkin with a sword strapped across her back, fit her no-nonsense attitude perfectly. Caane joined the small circle, feeling a sense of relief wash over him at seeing them all safe. So, this is happening, huh? He said, trying to process everything. His father, ever the pragmatist, nodded. It seems so. This transition is going to require some adapting. Stephen glanced around as though assessing their new reality. Have you looked at your status sheet yet? Caane blinked. No, not yet. Best do that now. If we're going to survive, thrive here, we need to understand our capabilities. Caane gave a quick nod and focused, bringing up his status sheet in front of him, the translucent window materializing again, but this time with detailed information. Name, Caane Murphy. Level, 1 race, human class, mage profession, NA grade, F, stats. Strength, star 10, dexterity, dex, 10 constitution, con, 10 endurance, end, 10 intelligence, int, 11 willpower, will, 10 wisdom, wiz 10 charisma, char, 10 free points, 1 HP, 100 SP, 100 MP, 110. Mage class abilities, Manable, Aidan, arcane, armor. His eyes lingered on the descriptions of each stat. Strength determined his physical power, dexterity his agility, and constitution governed his health and recovery. Endurance impacted stamina, intelligence increased his spell damage, willpower controlled his mana reserves, wisdom helped him perceive the world around him, and charisma influenced his social interactions. Noticing the free point available to him, Caane thought for a moment and decided to invest it in willpower, raising his mana capacity. All right, Caane said, closing the window and explaining his stats to his family. His father listened carefully, nodding in approval. Smart choice, increasing your mana early. His mother smiled, offering her usual support. We'll need to find professions quickly. It'll give us purpose while we wait for Earth to be ready. Sarah gave a nod, resting a hand on her sword's hilt. Let's start with that. After discussing the situation briefly, his parents and Sarah decided to look for trainers and professions first. Caane agreed and excused himself to meet the others at the tavern. A plan already forming in his mind, the tavern was bustling with people when Caane entered, the smell of ale and roasting meat wafting through the air. Animated conversation filled the room with people discussing what direction they wanted to take in this new world. As he looked around, he spotted his friends at a table near the fireplace, eagerly awaiting his arrival. Just then, the burly innkeeper, Heath, approached their table, balancing a tray laden with frothy mugs of ale. Welcome to the tutorial town, lads! Here's a round on the house to help ease the transition, he exclaimed, his voice booming above the lively chatter. Why, thank you, kind sir, Travis quipped, taking a mug for himself. The others all raised their newly obtained glasses to the innkeeper in appreciation. Find your family, Aidan asked, still radiating excitement, his eyes shining with curiosity as Heath set down the drinks. Yeah, Caane nodded, pulling up a chair. They're checking out professions. What about you guys? Same for all of us, Julius said, leaning back in his chair with a relaxed demeanor. The question is, should we explore or find a profession for ourselves first? Travis grinned, leaning forward with enthusiasm. I vote for exploring. We could figure out professions later. There's a whole world out there waiting for us, and I'd hate to miss something exciting. Aidan chuckled. You just want to find more trouble, don't you? Caane smirked, raising an eyebrow. Fine by me, but first we'll need some gear. The thought of new adventures set his heart racing, but he knew they couldn't go unprepared. They decided to stop by a general store before venturing out into the wild. Andy, here, the group's first experience at the general store was anything but ordinary. As they pushed open the creaky wooden door, a small bell chimed overhead, announcing their arrival. The inside of the store was dimly lit, with shelves lined with all manner of supplies, weathered leather satchels, coils of rope, tarnished lanterns, and glass jars filled with mysterious powders. The place smelled faintly of old wood, dried herbs, and something metallic like oiled metal. Dust floated lazily through the air, illuminated by the shafts of light sneaking through the small, foggy windows. Behind the counter stood Gray, the store's owner, a tall, broad-shouldered human male with a face that looked as though it had seen one too many battles. His grizzled beard was streaked with gray, and his sharp steel-blue eyes scanned the group with an air of impatience. He wore a heavy leather apron stained with grease and dirt, which only added to his rugged, no-nonsense demeanor. Need something, do you? Gray asked, his voice gruff as he leaned against the counter, crossing his thick arms. His gaze lingered on Aidan first, likely sizing him up before sweeping over the rest of the group. Travis, with his quick darting eyes that were already scanning the shelves. Michael, standing tall and calm, but with a hint of uncertainty in his expression. Julius, casually leaning against the doorframe, observing with his usual easygoing manner, and finally Caane, who hung back slightly, ever the observer. We're heading out soon, Aidan began, his tone steady as he stepped forward. Looking for supplies, backpacks, rations, maybe a few torches, rope, anything that might help us out in the field? Gray raised an eyebrow, his gaze flicking toward the worn blades at Aidan's belt and the travel-worn gear they already carried. Explorers, eh? Plenty of folks like you come through here thinking they're ready for the wild and ain't as easy as you might believe. He paused, then gestured toward a shelf lined with canvas bags. But I ain't here to give you a lecture. As the group moved closer to inspect the goods, Gray's gruff exterior softened just a little, but not much. He began pulling out various items, slapping them onto the counter with an air of impatience. You'll need proper packs, he said, handing Aidan and Julius a pair of sturdy leather backpacks. Rations for at least a week, dried meats, biscuits, and a little cheese if you're lucky. He pointed to a shelf stocked with small burlap sacks. And rope! Always take rope! Travis, eyeing a curious silver vial on one of the side shelves, asked with a grin, What's this? Something useful for an adventurer? Gray grunted. That's a snake oil salesman's best friend. Won't do you much good unless you plan on scamming someone. Travis chuckled, setting the vial back down, but not without a mischievous glint in his eye. Caane quietly inspected a few small rune-carved stones displayed under a glass counter, wondering if they held any magical properties. But before he could ask, Gray's attention shifted back to Aidan. Now, for the price. I don't run a charity, lads. You want these supplies, you'll need to pay in coin or goods. If you come back with something valuable from wherever you're headed, we can call it even. Deal? Aidan, always the negotiator in practical matters, nodded. Deal. Good. Just don't go getting yourselves killed. Makes it hard to repay debts. Gray's attempt at a joke was lost under his stern expression, though Julius let out a soft laugh, nudging Aidan. They left the shop with their new gear, backpacks slung over their shoulders, and rations safely stowed away. The weight of their upcoming adventure hung in the air as they stepped back out into the busy street, the chime of the bell behind them marking the end of the transaction. With their new equipment packed and ready, the group headed west toward the distant forest. As they left the town's perimeter, a notification appeared before them. You have exited the town's safe zone. Aidan grinned, his shield strapped to his arm, while Julius and Travis walked with a quiet intensity, discussing their abilities. So, what can everyone do? Aidan asked, leading the way. Aidan revealed his Power Strike and Shield Bash, both physical attacks designed for up-close combat. Julius, unsurprisingly, had Precision Strike and Rapid Shot, ideal for long-range engagements. Travis, ever the rogue, had acquired Backstab and Stealth, both perfect for his sneaky approach. Michael, their healer, could use Lesser Heal and Magic Shield to protect others. Caane went last, mentioning his Mana Bolt for offensive spells and Arcane Armor for defense. As they walked, Travis spotted a small cluster of thistle plants growing by the roadside. "These look like potion ingredients," he said, crouching down to pick them. After gathering several, he exclaimed, "Jackpot! I just got the herbalism skill." The forest ahead was lush, the trees full and green, with the soft sounds of birds chirping and a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. As they ventured deeper, Julius and Travis scouted ahead, eventually discovering a game trail. Following it, they came upon a pack of 4 wolves, their levels ranging from 1 to 3, feasting on a freshly killed deer. Aidan signaled for the group to prepare for battle. The fight was swift but intense. Aidan charged in with a shield bash, Julius loosed arrows from the tree line, Travis flanked for a critical backstab, and Caane hurled mana bolts at the wolves. Michael kept the party shielded and healed as needed. The wolves went down one by one, and the group stood victorious. "That was awesome," Julius said, a wide grin on his face. "I even got a sneak skill while scouting. I'm thinking about becoming a ranger." The group pressed onward through the vibrant forest, their spirits soaring after a string of victories. The sun filtered through the canopy above, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. They marveled at the lush greenery and the occasional flicker of wildlife darting through the trees, but their moment of awe was cut short when they heard a low guttural grunt. From the underbrush, a massive boar burst forth, its hulking frame covered in dirt and battle scars. The creature, a level 5 beast, snorted aggressively, pawing the ground as it sized up the party. Its hide was marred with deep scratches, likely from fending off other predators, and its bloodshot eyes glared at them with wild ferocity. "Spread out," Aidan barked, gripping his sword as he stepped forward, trying to draw the boar's attention. The boar charged, its tusk gleaming in the sunlight. Aidan braced himself, raising his shield just in time to block the beast's initial attack. The impact was tremendous, sending him stumbling back. Julius, nimble as ever, fired an arrow that lodged itself in the boar's side, but the creature barely flinched, its rage only intensifying. Caane stood back, focusing on his mana. He wasn't built for close combat like Aidan, but his mana bolts had proven effective against smaller enemies. This, however, was a different challenge. With a quick gesture, he conjured arcane armor. Shimmering blue energy enveloping him just as the boar turned its attention his way. "Keep it distracted," Julius shouted, loosing another arrow. The projectile thudded into the boar's flank, drawing a pained squeal, but the beast's thick hide made it difficult to bring down. Aidan gritted his teeth, charging back into the fray. He swung his sword in wide arcs, trying to slice through the creature's defenses, but the boar's relentless thrashing made it hard to land a solid blow. It lashed out with its tusks, catching Aidan across the thigh, sending him staggering with a grunt of pain. "Damn, this thing's tougher than it looks," Aidan shouted, frustration lacing his voice. Caane focused, summoning a bright blue mana bolt into his palm. With a sharp motion, he released it, the bolt striking the boar in the side. It let out a roar of pain, but the creature was relentless. Charging again, Caane sidestepped just in time. The arcane armor flaring as the boar's tusks grazed it. Travis darted in and out of the boar's blind spots, slashing at its legs with his daggers, but the beast's hide was too thick. "Come on, big guy, give us an opening," he called, trying to stay light on his feet. Julius landed another arrow, this time hitting the creature near its neck. The boar screeched in pain, slowing slightly, giving Aidan the opening he needed. With a roar of effort, Aidan brought his sword down in a mighty swing, the blade biting deep into the boar's side. It let out one last enraged squeal before collapsing in a heap. Panting, the group barely had time to celebrate when a new threat emerged from the forest. The unmistakable growls of wolves echoed through the trees, and moments later, 5 wolves prowled out from the shadows, their eyes glowing with predatory hunger. They had been drawn by the noise of the fight, and they looked ready to strike. "Not more of them!" Travis groaned, but his smile showed he was ready for the challenge. Caane's heart raced as the wolves circled, their growls growing louder. Fatigue from the previous fight weighed heavily on them all, but there was no choice but to face this new threat. Aidan and Julius quickly took up defensive stances while Caane prepared his mana bolts. The first wolf lunged, fangs bared. Aidan stepped forward, swinging his sword, but the wolf was fast, dodging and snapping at his arm. Before it could bite down, Caane hurled a mana bolt, striking the wolf in the side. It yelped and tumbled away, momentarily stunned, but the other wolves weren't deterred. Julius fired arrows, each one finding its mark, but the wolves were relentless. 2 wolves rushed him at once. He managed to dodge one, but the second wolf tackled him to the ground, jaws snapping dangerously close to his throat. Travis, seeing the danger, leaped in, driving his daggers into the wolf's side. The creature howled in pain, rolling off Julius, who quickly scrambled to his feet. Together, they fought off the remaining wolves, slashing and shooting with precision. Caane stayed back, casting one mana bolt after another. His bolts hit their targets, taking down 2 more wolves, but each cast left him more drained than the last. The final wolf snarled, its eyes locked on Caane. It charged, teeth gleaming, but Caane, stealing his resolve, fired a last desperate mana bolt. The bolt hit the wolf in the chest, sending it crashing to the ground in a heap. The forest fell eerily silent save for the heavy breathing of the group. They were battered, bruised, and utterly exhausted, but they had won. As the last wolf collapsed, a soft chime echoed in their minds, followed by a notification that flashed before their eyes. Level up. Relief washed over them, a sense of accomplishment and strength filling their tired bodies. Caane exhaled deeply, eyes scanning the trees. Finally, he muttered, pulling up his stat screen. Without hesitation, he invested his new point into Constitution. We're going to need more health if things keep going like this. I'm with you there, Aidan said, rolling his shoulders as he opened his own stat menu. He winced as he felt the strain from the back-to-back battles. Constitution for me too. I can't afford to drop before the rest of you. Julius nodded in agreement, his bow still in hand. Same. Getting hit by one of those wolves hurt way more than I'd like. He placed his point into Constitution, hoping for a little more survivability. Michael, ever calm, said, Constitution, we can't afford to be fragile, not with what's out here. Meanwhile, Travis was grinning as he flipped through his stats. You all can bulk up, but I'm going for dexterity. Gotta stay fast on my feet if I'm gonna keep out of reach. He added his point to dexterity with a wink. Besides, someone's gotta make sure I can still pick the locks while you all tank the hits. Aidan smirked, though his stance remained guarded. Just don't run off too fast and leave us behind. The distant cry of a bird echoed through the woods as the group finally took a moment to catch their breath, the weight of the battle and their new levels still sinking in. Well, that was fun, Travis quipped, wiping sweat from his forehead. But I could really go for a rest now, maybe something with fewer teeth? Aidan chuckled, his grip relaxing slightly on his shield. Come on, you handled yourself pretty well for a guy who spent most of the fight stabbing things in the back. Travis's grin widened. Hey, stealth is an art. You wouldn't understand. Enough bickering, Julius interjected, his bow slung across his shoulder. We should keep moving before anything else smells the blood and decides to join the party. Caane nodded, glancing at the bodies of the fallen wolves, the glistening fur now matted with dirt and blood. Agreed, we're in no shape to fight another pack. Michael was already casting a low-level healing spell, his brow furrowed in concentration. A soft glow enveloped Aidan's arm where the wolf had bitten him earlier. The wound slowly knit itself back together, leaving only faint scars. We need to head back to town and regroup, Michael said quietly, his usual serious tone taking on an edge of exhaustion. Our supplies won't last through another fight like that. Before we do that, let me skin these wolves so we at least have something to give to Gray when we get back, said Julius, already pulling a knife from his belt. All right, yeah, that's a good idea, Caane replied. We'll keep watch while you do that. A short time when later all the wolf pelts were gathered, Julius, surprised, remarked, Oh, sweet, just picked up the hunting skill for tracking down, killing, and skinning wolves. After a few congratulations and slaps on the back, the group began their trek back, their pace slower now as fatigue set in. The trail they followed twisted deeper into the forest, the canopy above darkening as the sun dipped lower on the horizon. The mood was somber, yet tinged with a quiet satisfaction. Each of them had gained experience, learned a little more about their new abilities. Julius, ever the observer, was the first to break the silence. So, Caane, how are you holding up with all this magic stuff? It's a lot different than the coding you were used to back home. Caane smirked. It's weird, honestly. There's this energy inside me that wasn't there before, like I can feel the spells just waiting to be used. Mana Bolt's pretty straightforward, but arcane armor? That's a whole new level. It's like wearing magic itself as a shield. Travis gave a low whistle. Sounds fancy. Maybe I should have picked mage, though I'm pretty happy being the sneaky one. Aidan laughed. Yeah, because we all know you'd last about 2 minutes in a real fight without your stealth. You've got rogue written all over you. Travis feigned a wounded expression. I'll have you know I'm quite durable. For example, I didn't get hit once. Michael rolled his eyes. That's because you were hiding behind trees the entire time. Strategically positioning myself, Travis corrected, to maximize my backstabbing potential. Julius grinned. As long as it works, I guess. They continued walking, the banter easing some of the tension from the fight. The sun was nearly gone by the time they reached the outskirts of the town, the warm glow of torchlight from the village guiding them back. As they approached the gate, Caane glanced over his shoulder at the forest, feeling an odd mixture of excitement and dread for the next adventure. Once inside, the tavern welcomed them with the smell of roasting meat and the low murmur of the recently inducted, and a few townsfolk gathered around tables. Heath looked up from polishing a glass and gave them a nod of acknowledgement from his place behind the bar. Good haul? Heath asked, wiping down a mug. We survived, Aidan replied, sliding into a chair at their usual table. Travis dropped into a seat beside him, letting out an exaggerated sigh. Barely, but we took down some wolves and even bagged a boar. Level 5 boar, Julius added, leaning his bow against the wall, and it was no walk in the park either. Heath raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. You're moving up in the world. Might want to look into some better gear soon. Wolves and boars are one thing, but there's worse out there if you keep going. Caane sat down with a thoughtful expression. He's right. We'll need to improve if we're going to handle tougher enemies. Maybe find some trainers, work on our skills. Michael nodded in agreement. We also need to think about professions. They'll offer more than just combat skills. If Earth isn't ready for a while, we're going to need something to sustain us. Aidan leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. I was thinking blacksmithing. It'll give us better weapons and armor. I'm considering cartography, Julius said thoughtfully. We don't know this place well enough yet, and maps could give us an edge. I'm sticking with herbalism, Travis chimed in, reaching into his pouch to pull out the thistle plants he'd collected earlier. These babies are going to come in handy once I figure out how to make potions. Caane glanced around at his friends, feeling a sense of pride welling up inside him. They were adapting quickly, each of them stepping into roles that suited their strengths, just like in the old games they used to play, only now the stakes were real. I think we've got a solid plan, Caane said with a nod. Let's rest up, train, and then get back out there. This world's not going to explore itself. After a well-deserved night of sleep following their arrival in town, Caane woke early, the echoes of their recent battles still fresh in his mind. His thoughts turned to Gray, the gruff shopkeeper they'd dealt with the day before. The wolf skins they'd collected from their last encounter with the vicious creatures weighed heavy in his backpack, and Caane was eager to make the trade. As the group gathered their belongings, Aidan strapped his sword to his back, his steady demeanor a reassuring presence. Ready to go? He asked, glancing over at Caane. Caane nodded, his mind elsewhere as he tugged his coat tighter. Yeah, let's head back to Gray's. The general store was much as they'd left it. The bell chimed again as they entered, and Gray, standing behind the counter, looked up from polishing an old dagger. His steel blue eyes narrowed in recognition as he set the weapon aside. Back already? He asked, his tone gruff but curious. We brought wolf skins, Aidan said, dropping the bundle onto the counter with a thud. Figured you might be interested in a trade. Gray's eyes gleamed as he inspected the pelts, running a hand over the thick, coarse fur. Not bad. I'll give you a fair trade for these, he said, tossing a few gold coins onto the counter and a small pouch of dried food. That should cover your next trip. Anything else you need? The group exchanged glances. Caane, still thinking about how they could advance in this strange new world, decided to ask, Gray, we've been wondering, where should we go from here? We're trying to figure out how to advance our skills, maybe pick up professions. Any advice? The old shopkeeper grunted, crossing his arms. Depends what you're after, he said, his gaze shifting between them. If you want to sharpen your blades and take on tougher monsters, head east to the forest. Plenty of creatures lurking there, good for honing your combat skills. And if we want something else, Julius asked, intrigued. Gray smirked. If you're after knowledge, head south. There's a small library there, though it's more like a bookstore. Run by an elf, Farron, knows more about the system than most. If you want answers about how things work around here, that's where you should go. Caane's interest peaked at the mention of Farron. A library? He muttered under his breath, already imagining the knowledge that might lie within its dusty shelves. He'd been grappling with questions ever since they'd been thrown into this strange world. The leveling system, the concept of evolution, his own race being listed as F, whatever that meant. Maybe Farron had the answers. The group decided to split up for a while, agreeing to meet back later to discuss what they'd learned. Caane, his curiosity getting the better of him, made his way south following Gray's directions. The library was tucked away at the edge of town, its sign barely legible, weathered from years of neglect. Inside it was quiet, with the scent of old paper and ink hanging in the air. Shelves filled with ancient tomes and scrolls lined the walls, and at the center of it all sat Farron, the elf Gray had mentioned. Tall and slender, with silver hair that flowed past his shoulders, Farron had an air of calm wisdom about him. "Welcome," Farron said, not looking up from the book he was reading. "You must be new here." Caane hesitated, then stepped forward. "Yeah, I've got some questions about the system, about how this world works." Farron set the book down and folded his hands, his emerald eyes locking onto Caine's with an intensity that made him feel like the elf could see straight through him. "Ask, and I'll answer what I can." Caane wasted no time. "How do I level up? What's an evolution? And why does my race say F? And how do I get more abilities?" Farron nodded thoughtfully at the barrage of questions. "You level by gaining experience, through battle, exploration, or knowledge. It is the essence of growth in this world. As for evolution, it's an advanced form of leveling. When you reach certain thresholds, you can evolve into a higher form of yourself. That, however, depends on your choices and what paths you take." "And my race? Why F?" Caane asked, frowning. Farron's lips twitched in amusement. "The F signifies the potential tier of your race. Most beings start low, and as you grow, that too can evolve." Caane processed the information, his mind racing with possibilities. Farron continued, explaining that abilities were honed through practice or combat, and can be gained through combat or pursuing one's path, ability tomes, and at certain level thresholds. As the conversation went on, Caane realized that the elf's knowledge was vast, and that he needed to understand the intricacies of this world if they were to survive. Farron, noticing Caine's hunger for knowledge, offered him a proposition. "You seek wisdom. Stay here and learn from me while you are in this tutorial phase. I can help you master your mind as well as your magic. Become my apprentice, and you will gain the profession of scholar." Caane agreed without hesitation. The moment he accepted, he felt a subtle shift in his being. His mind felt sharper, clearer. "Congratulations, profession has been updated to scholar. You will receive +1 intelligence and +1 wisdom with every level. You have reached level 1 in scholar, +1 to intelligence and wisdom. You have gained the ability lore. Will give insight into objects, people, and history. Improved based on wisdom and intelligence. The more you know, the more you know." Later, he met up with the rest of the group at their lodging. They exchanged stories of their respective ventures. Aidan and the others spoke of weapons, combat skills, and future plans, while Caane recounted his new apprenticeship with Farron and the knowledge he'd gained. The next day, they ventured into the forest, armed with new knowledge and equipment. Wolves lurked in the shadows of the trees, and after a brief, intense battle, the group emerged victorious, each of them leveling up. As they delved deeper into the woods, an ominous cave loomed ahead, its entrance dark and foreboding. Without hesitation, they entered, torches flickering as the shadows danced on the walls. Inside, they discovered it was more than just a cave. It was a strange portal filled with swirling purple lines, creating a vortex. Add about apertures and make them deliberate on whether to go in for a bit. A quest notification appeared before their eyes. Aperture quest: kill the denizens, sub-bosses, and the boss. Rewards: unknown. The group descended into the first chamber, their movements silent as they advanced through the dim cave. 5 goblins sat huddled around a sputtering campfire, chattering in their guttural language, completely unaware of the danger closing in on them. Caane held his breath, heart thumping in anticipation. His hand hovered just above his waist, fingers twitching with readiness to cast his mana bolts. Aidan, moving with the grace of a seasoned warrior, took the lead. His broad frame moved with surprising stealth as he crept toward the nearest goblin. With a swift, decisive strike, Aidan's sword sliced clean through the creature's throat, and the goblin collapsed silently, its body slumping into the dirt. The rest of the goblins scrambled to their feet, alarm flashing in their yellowed eyes, but it was already too late. Julius, his bow already drawn, loosed an arrow that struck another goblin straight through the chest, knocking it into the fire with a dying shriek. Travis darted forward, his daggers flashing as he weaved between the remaining goblins. One swung wildly at him with a crude club, but Travis ducked low, slipping under the strike and driving his blade into the goblin's ribs. A quick flick of his wrist and the dagger tore free, leaving the goblin gasping as it collapsed. Caane stepped forward, focusing his energy. The familiar blue glow of his mana bolt crackled in his palm. He thrust his hand out, releasing the bolt toward the 2 remaining goblins. The first bolt struck one goblin square in the chest, sending it flying back against the wall with a sickening crunch. The second goblin had barely turned to run when another bolt hit it between the shoulders, its body crumpling to the ground in a heap. The battle was over in moments, the flickering flames of the campfire casting eerie shadows on the bodies scattered around the room. Aidan wiped his blade on his tunic, the hint of a satisfied smile tugging at his lips. "Too easy," he muttered, surveying the scene. The rest of the group exchanged glances, their instincts sharpened by the skirmish, but they knew the dungeon had more in store for them. They advanced cautiously into the next chamber. The room was wider, its ceiling covered in jagged stalactites, while stalagmites jutted up from the floor, creating a maze of stone pillars. The moment they stepped inside, the air was filled with a shrill, piercing screech. 10 cave bats, disturbed from their roosts, swooped down from the shadows above, their wings flapping wildly. "Bats, keep your heads down!" Julius yelled, immediately drawing his bow and taking aim. He released an arrow, and it struck one of the bats in the wing, sending it spiraling to the ground with a high-pitched screech. Aidan swung his sword in wide arcs, slashing at the bats as they dove toward him. One bat, faster than the others, managed to sink its claws into his arm, but Aidan grimaced, shook it off, and cleaved the creature in half with a brutal downward strike. Travis ducked and rolled, evading the bat's chaotic swoops with ease. His daggers flashed as he took down another bat that came too close, slicing it cleanly out of the air. Caane, meanwhile, stayed back, eyes darting between his comrades as the bats swarmed them. He raised his hand, summoning another mana bolt. A bat swooped down toward him, claws outstretched, but Caane was faster. The mana bolt surged from his palm, hitting the creature square in the chest. The bat let out a shriek before it crashed to the ground, motionless. Another bat came at him from behind, but before it could reach him, Michael raised his hand and cast a shimmering barrier around Caane. The bat bounced off the magical shield, disoriented, and Caane seized the moment, firing another bolt that struck the creature out of the air. The battle was a flurry of wings and claws, the screeching of bats mixing with the sounds of metal striking flesh. Julius fired arrows with rapid precision, each shot bringing down another bat, while Aidan and Travis cut through the rest with deadly efficiency. Caane's mana bolt streaked through the air, each one finding its mark with pinpoint accuracy. Finally, the last bat fell to the cave floor with a thud, its wings folding in on themselves in death. The room fell silent once more, save for the group's heavy breathing. Level up. +1 intelligence and +1 free stats. Seeing the message, Caane immediately put his free point into willpower and, glancing at Aidan's arm where a bat had clawed him, asked, "You all right?" "Just a scratch," Aidan grunted, wiping blood from his sleeve. "Nothing to worry about?" Michael stepped forward, his hands glowing with healing light as he touched Aidan's arm, sealing the wound. "Thanks." Aidan nodded as they all took a moment to regroup. "Well, that was chaotic," Travis said with a grin, twirling one of his daggers. "But I think we're getting the hang of this." Caane smiled as he looked at the remains of the bats. They were learning, growing stronger with each fight, but they also knew this aperture wasn't done with them yet. "Yeah," Aidan agreed, sheathing his sword, "but this place is only going to get tougher. Let's keep moving." With their instincts honed and their confidence bolstered, the group pressed onward, ready for whatever the aperture threw at them next. In the third cavern, the group found themselves at a cross-section of 4 winding tunnels, the air growing thicker with a musty scent of goblins and something else, a more sinister aura lingering in the shadows. Caane's heart raced with anticipation as they stood at the entrance, deliberating their next move. "Which way first?" Aidan whispered, gripping his sword, his muscles tense but ready. Caane scanned the tunnels, his mind whirring. "Let's check the left," he suggested, pointing toward the first tunnel. "We can clear them out systematically." The group moved cautiously, their footsteps barely making a sound on the cold stone floor. As they approached the first cavern, a faint clinking of metal and grunting could be heard. They peered in and saw a workshop, a dozen goblins and hobgoblins hammering away at makeshift weapons and crude armor. The goblins looked small and scrappy, while the hobgoblins, larger and more imposing, seemed to oversee the work. Aidan was the first to step forward, his eyes narrowing as he drew his sword. With a swift, decisive motion, he charged into the room, his blade catching the nearest goblin off guard. The creature let out a guttural scream before it was silenced by Aidan's strike. The room exploded into chaos as the goblins scrambled for their weapons. Julius notched an arrow and let it fly, the sharp whistle of the projectile slicing through the air and embedding itself into a hobgoblin's chest. The larger creature roared, but Julius was quick to send another arrow into its neck, bringing it down before it could reach him. Travis, ever nimble, darted between goblins, his twin daggers flashing in the dim light. With a wicked grin, he sidestepped a clumsy attack from a goblin and, in one fluid motion, slashed across its abdomen. The goblin crumpled, and Travis leaped onto the next, his daggers finding weak spots in their armor. Meanwhile, Michael stood back, his hands glowing with divine light as he muttered prayers under his breath. The group could feel the healing energy wash over them, reinvigorating their muscles as they fought on. Every time someone took a hit, Michael was there, keeping them in the fight with his unwavering focus. Caane, tapping into the raw magic within him, conjured a mana bolt in his palm. With a flick of his wrist, the blue bolt shot toward a group of hobgoblins, exploding on impact and sending them sprawling. The heat singed their armor, and before they could recover, Caane followed up with a bolt of lightning that arced from one enemy to the next, leaving a trail of scorched corpses in its wake. In a matter of minutes, the workshop was silent, save for the sound of heavy breathing. Aidan wiped his blade clean on a fallen goblin's tunic. "One down," he said, his voice steady but winded. 3 to go. They quickly regrouped and made their way back to the cross-section, choosing the first cavern on the right. This one, they discovered, was a kitchen of sorts, and it was bustling with goblins cooking up a vile-smelling stew. 7 of them were milling about, completely unaware of the impending attack. Julius took the lead this time, silently signaling for them to fan out. He knocked an arrow, pulling it back just enough to let it hover at his bow's string. When he released, the arrow zipped through the air, striking one of the goblins in the eye. The creature let out a shriek, but it was drowned out as Aidan and Travis burst into the room, cutting down 2 more before the others had time to react. The goblins scrambled for their knives and makeshift weapons, but they were no match for the group's combined skill. Caane hurled another fireball, the explosion taking out 2 goblins at once, their screams echoing off the cavern walls. Michael stood at the entrance, keeping an eye on their flank, but it was clear the battle was over almost as quickly as it had begun. "We're getting faster," Travis commented, wiping sweat from his brow. "This is starting to feel a little too easy." "Don't jinx it," Caane muttered. Though he shared the sentiment, they were growing stronger, and the system seemed to reward their progress with every fight. Next, they ventured into the second cavern on the right, a barracks filled with 8 hobgoblins, all of whom were already geared up and ready for a fight. Unlike the goblins, these creatures were bigger, tougher, and immediately aggressive. As soon as the group entered, the hobgoblins charged. Aidan met them head-on, his sword clashing against the first hobgoblin's axe with a deafening clang. Sparks flew as the 2 warriors traded blows, but Aidan's sheer strength gave him the edge. He parried an attack and, with a swift uppercut, drove his sword into the hobgoblin's torso, felling it in a single strike. Julius circled the room, his bow in constant motion as he loosed arrow after arrow, each one finding its mark. A hobgoblin lunged at him, but he nimbly dodged, rolling to the side before shooting it in the back of the head. Caane focused on the hobgoblins grouped near the back, raising his hand and summoning a torrent of icy wind. The spell hit them with a blast of cold, freezing their movements for a few precious seconds. Aidan and Travis wasted no time cutting them down while they were incapacitated. One hobgoblin broke through the ranks and swung a heavy mace at Michael, but the priest used his divine shield, blocking the blow. Caught off guard, the hob was unprepared for Michael's staff, and it connected with a crack against the back of its skull and slammed its face first into the ground, killing the hob. By the time the last hobgoblin fell, the group was exhausted but exhilarated. "We're close," Caane said, his breath coming in heavy gas. "The boss is just down the last tunnel." They pressed on, their bodies aching but their spirits high. As they entered the final cavern, they were met with an imposing sight, a massive goblin chief, his grotesque form hulking over the 2 shaman goblins standing beside him. 4 hobgoblins stood in a protective formation around the chief, their eyes gleaming with malice. "Stay sharp," Aidan warned, tightening his grip on his sword. "This one's going to be tough." The goblin chief roared, and the shamans began chanting in a guttural language. Dark magic swirled in the air as they raised their staffs, preparing to unleash their spells. The hobgoblins charged forward, weapons raised. Caane quickly countered the shaman's magic with his own, sending a blast of arcane energy that disrupted their spellcasting. Julius, in perfect sync with Caane's attack, fired arrows at the hobgoblins, his shots precise and deadly. 2 went down immediately, but the others pressed on, their brute strength making them formidable opponents. Aidan was already engaged in a fierce duel with the goblin chief. The creature was far stronger than the others they'd faced, its massive axe swinging with terrifying force. Aidan dodged and parried, but each blow sent shockwaves up his arm. Still he fought on, gritting his teeth as he looked for an opening. Meanwhile, Travis darted around the battlefield, taking advantage of the chaos. He slipped behind one of the hobgoblins, his daggers flashing as he drove them into the creature's back. With a satisfied grin, he spun away and threw a knife at one of the shamans, hitting it square in the chest. The shaman crumpled, and Michael seized the moment to strike. He raised his hands, summoning a radiant beam of light that seared through the second shaman's defenses, reducing it to ash. With the shamans down, Caane focused all his energy on the goblin chief. He summoned a powerful bolt of lightning, directing it straight at the towering creature. The chief howled in pain as the electricity coursed through its body. But it wasn't enough to bring it down. Aidan saw his chance. With a battle cry, he surged forward, his sword glowing with Michael's blessing. He brought the blade down in a powerful arc, slicing through the goblin chief's armor and into its flesh. The creature let out one final roar before collapsing to the ground. Aperture quest complete. Rewards. X5 bag of holding. F grade. Talk about excitement about bags more. Congratulations for clearing your first aperture. You have gained the title Delver I, +1 to all stats, and Chursiu. Level up. You have 1 free stats. We did it, Caane said, a grin spreading across his face as they looked in awe at the spatial storage bag and excitement at all the loot from the goblins. In the end, they looted 89 copper coins, 24 silver coins, and all the gear from the hobgoblins and goblins, all put into their new bags. The ancient shrine appeared before them, half hidden in the heart of the forest, draped in a soft, otherworldly glow. The stone edifice was covered in vines and surrounded by vibrant, luminescent flowers that pulsed gently, casting long shadows across the clearing. Caane's eyes lit up as he activated his lore ability, trying to make sense of the aura surrounding the shrine. "This is a shrine of the hunt," Caane said, his voice tinged with awe. "It's tied to the gods." The air around them was thick with magic, an old and untamed energy that made the hair on the back of Caane's neck stand up. Before the group could react, flickers of light appeared from the darkened edges of the forest, will-o-wisps, their ghostly forms weaving through the trees, beckoning them deeper into the wild. "They want us to follow," Julius muttered, warily watching the floating lights. Without hesitation, they followed, drawn into the depths of the forest, but as they ventured further, the will-o-wisps tried to lead them astray, using illusions to separate them. Caane felt his mind slipping as one of the wisps whispered false paths into his thoughts. Gritting his teeth, he cast a mana bolt into the nearest illusion, dispelling it. Aidan slammed his shield into the earth, steadying the group as they pressed onward together, their determination outweighing the trickery of the spirits. Suddenly, the lights vanished, leaving the group standing before a pair of towering trees. From the shadows, 2 dryads emerged, tall, graceful beings with bark-like skin and eyes glowing a deep green. "What brings you here, mortals?" one of them demanded, her voice like the rustling of leaves. "We come seeking knowledge and power from this ancient holy place," Michael replied, stepping forward, his tone calm but firm. The dryads exchanged a glance, their eyes narrowing before they spoke again. "If you wish to earn the favor of the hunt, you must prove your worth. Each of you has a different path, chosen by the gods." With a wave of their hands, the dryads called forth the gods' presence. Each god's mark appeared on the ground, one for each of them, shimmering with divine power. Michael chose the symbol of the wild moon, god of the hunt and the night. Aidan stepped forward and knelt before the mark of Church Milvernus, the god of magma and smithing. Julius chose the emblem of Jochir Garmt Bractus, god of exploration and hunting. Travis selected the sign of Shibri Vale, god of alchemy. And Halbert Caane, just always drawn to the unknown, claimed the mark of Vedamor, god of knowledge and secrets. Said the world around them blurred as each of them was pulled into a different realm, separated by the will of the gods. Caane felt a chill sweep over him as he found himself in the dim halls of an ancient castle. The air was thick with secrets, the shadows clinging to every corner. His quest from Vedemore was clear: uncover the history of the castle and learn the secrets the family left behind. He activated his lore ability as he moved through the desolate rooms, piecing together the tale of the long-dead owners. The deeper he went, the more unsettling the truth became. The family had been wealthy, but they were also cursed, their bloodline tainted by dark magic. The kitchen, disturbingly, was a jail, and the opulence of the dining hall hid a bloody legacy. The final discovery was a hidden library accessed by a notch behind a portrait. Inside, Caane found tomes of vampiric history, revealing the family's dark lineage and the magic they wielded. Among the books were volumes on blood magic and mind control. As Caane gathered the knowledge, his lore ability evolved, granting him deeper insights into ancient magics and history. Meanwhile, the others faced their own trials. Michael was transported to a moonlit grove where he was tasked with nurturing a sapling with the help of forest spirits. The spirits tested his ability to commune with the natural world, and as he succeeded, a staff formed from the life tree, glowing with wild energy. Aidan found himself in a molten forge, the heat unbearable as he was tasked with creating a weapon. Under the watchful eye of Milvernus, he forged a sword from magma and metal, imbuing it with the power of the earth and flame. Julius, in the depths of a dense forest, was given a map and tasked with tracking a lynx. Every step he took sharpened his senses as he mapped the terrain, finally confronting the lynx in its den. Travis, ever the shadow, moved through the dark halls of an alchemist's lair. His task was to brew a poison and eliminate a target unseen. His precision and cunning earned him the blessing of Vale, making him a master of poison and stealth. Caane stood at the entrance of the ancient castle, its towering stone walls silhouetted against the gray sky. Shadows clung to every corner, thick and heavy, as if the castle itself exhaled darkness. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and something metallic, blood perhaps, lingering in the very bones of the structure. His task was clear: uncover the secrets of the castle's former inhabitants and claim any knowledge left behind. Stepping inside, Caane activated his, lore ability, feeling the magic hum beneath his skin. The castle's history seemed to press against him, an oppressive weight, as if the stones themselves whispered the sins of its past. The family that once lived here had been wealthy, decadent even. Golden sconces lined the hallways, tarnished with time, and tapestries of noble lineage hung in shreds, but there was something more sinister than mere opulence lingering in the air. The deeper Caane ventured, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. Faint rustling sounds echoed through the halls like whispers carried on a non-existent breeze. He found the dining hall, a grand chamber that could seat dozens, but the plates were dusty, the food long decayed. Strangely, the room felt like it had been abandoned in haste, as if the family had vanished overnight. But it was the kitchen that unsettled him most. Instead of ovens or tables for preparing food, it was lined with iron bars, a jail. Chains hung from the walls, and the scent of old blood was stronger here, as though lives had been extinguished in this room for generations. He reached out with his, seeking answers. The truth began to unravel, and a shiver ran down his spine. Vampires? The family had been vampires, living in the shadows, hiding behind their wealth and power. They had fed on those unfortunate enough to enter their domain. The kitchen turned prison, serving as their feeding ground. The deeper Caane delved into the castle, the more the bloody history of the place revealed itself. Faint traces of magic clung to the walls, a mix of blood magic and dark mental manipulation. Caane pressed onward, reaching a grand staircase that spiraled up into the darkened heights of the castle. Each step creaked under his weight, the sound echoing ominously through the silence. At the top, he found the study. A luxurious room lined with towering bookshelves, the scent of old parchment filling the air. He began his search, pulling books from the shelves. Most were mundane, histories of the lands, treaties, and accounts of old wars. But his instincts told him something more lay hidden here. After hours of searching, Caane's gaze landed on a painting behind the desk. He felt a tug from his lore ability, urging him closer. As he inspected the edges of the frame, his fingers brushed against a hidden notch beside a bookshelf. With a soft click, a concealed door swung open, revealing a hidden library. The air inside was cooler, and the shadows seemed to cling more densely here. The room was filled with ledgers, journals, and tomes detailing the family's dark secrets. Ledgers, chronicled the lands they ruled, the people they manipulated, and their twisted bloodlines. There were also ancient tomes on vampiric magic detailing their mastery over both blood and the mind. Caane's lore's ability surged, feeding him more detailed information than ever before. The ability itself seemed to evolve, unlocking deeper knowledge of ancient magic and bloodline histories. His hands brushed over the spines of the books, reading their titles aloud. Charm, F-grade tome. A tome on mental manipulation, allowing subtle control of weaker minds. Blood sense, F-grade tome. Cannot learn this ability, requires an intelligence and constitution of 20. A book detailing how to heighten a vampire's ability to detect blood and living creatures nearby. Night vision, F-grade tome. A practical guide on seeing in total darkness. Further into the library, Caane discovered rarer, more dangerous tomes. Hemomancy, mastery. An E-grade tome that delves deep into the manipulation of blood, teaching advanced techniques for using it as both a weapon and a source of power. He continued through the rows of shelves, finding tomes that expanded on the family's mastery of the mind. Mind, probe, F-grade tome. A tome outlining how to skim the surface, thoughts of others, a skill used to extract information without detection. Fear gaze, F-grade tome. A book describing how to instill paralyzing fear in a target, causing them to flee or become motionless in terror. Sleep, F-grade tome. A simple but effective spell that could put weaker minds into a deep magical slumber. Telepathy, F-grade tome. A treatise on mental communication allowing vampires to speak mind to mind over short distances. Mental fortitude, F-grade tome. A text focused on defending the mind from intrusion and mental attacks. And finally, an ancient tome bound in dark leather, the words etched in silver. Psychic domination. A grade tome, allowing a more powerful form of control, allowing the user to completely dominate the will of another for a short time. Caane's fingers lingered over the books, each tome giving off a faint energy. He hesitated and decided to use the tomes he could, leaving the E-grade tomes and blood sense tome for later. Caane needed every ability he could get if he was to not just survive, but thrive in this new world. As he absorbed the knowledge of the vampires, he felt his own power grow. The shadows of the castle seemed to recede slightly, as if acknowledging his newfound strength. Before leaving, Caane looked once more at the hidden library, the echoes of the family's dark past lingering in the air. He had uncovered their secrets, and now their power, twisted and deadly, was his to wield. As he stepped out of the study, he knew he had gained far more than just knowledge. He had unlocked a new path, one that would forever change the course of his journey. As he continued out of the study, his surroundings disappeared, and he was once more standing in front of the Dryads, his friends to either side of him. At a glance, he could see they had all made great gains, and he was even more excited to continue their escapades. "Well done, adventurers," said one of the Dryads. "You have passed the test put in front and have been awarded as such. The Pantheon has deemed that you will be their champions in this new world. Always seek adventure, knowledge, and, above all, power." With a bow, the Dryads disappeared and a notification appeared in Caane's vision. "For completing Vademor's trial and discovering all the vampire's secrets, Vademor has blessed you. New title earned. Blessing of Vademor, plumped 5% to intelligence, wisdom, and willpower." As the group left the dark shadows of the ancient vampire castle, a sense of renewed purpose flowed through them. Each had gained powerful new skills and knowledge from the trials of the hunt, and now they were eager to test their abilities in the world. Heading to the edge of the forest where it met the open plains, the group soon found their first challenge. 5 feral centaurs, each towering and wild, charged toward them. Their hooves thundered across the ground, and their primal, beast-like roars filled the air. These creatures were formidable, level 10, and far more powerful than any enemy they had yet faced. Aidan, gripping the sword he had forged in Milvernus's trial, stood at the front, shield raised. "Hold the line!" he shouted as the centaurs closed in. The battle erupted into chaos. Julius, quick on his feet, knocked an arrow and loosed it with a sharp twang of his bowstring. The arrow whistled through the air, striking the nearest centaur in the chest, but the creature barely flinched, driven by its feral rage. Julius cursed under his breath and ducked behind a rock, using his new mini-map ability to track the centaur's movements in real time. Caane muttered an incantation, his hands glowing with arcane energy. He summoned a mana bolt, sending a shimmering streak of energy at one of the centaurs. The beast screamed as the arcane energy coursed through its body, but it pressed on undeterred. Aidan met the centaurs head-on. His blade clashed with the lead centaur's spear, sparks flying as they exchanged heavy blows. Aidan's sword, forged in the heat of Milvernus's volcanic forge, hummed with the power of the magma god. With each strike, fire flared from the blade, scorching the centaur's hide. Yet, even with his strength and resistance to the creature's earth-shaking blows, Aidan knew this fight would not be easy. Michael, staff in hand, called upon his new connection to the natural world. He whispered an ancient prayer, and roots burst from the ground, entangling one of the centaurs and holding it in place. He followed it up with nature's touch, healing Aidan's wounds as he fought. Travis, ever the rogue, darted between the chaos. His shade sight let him weave through the shadows, unseen by the centaurs until it was too late. He leapt onto the back of one of the creatures, his blade slick with a poison he had concocted from herbs found earlier. The centaur reared back, howling in pain as the poison took hold, its movement slowing. The battle was fierce, but the group's teamwork held strong. Caane's spells rained down, and Julius's arrows found their marks. Aidan's sword cleaved through muscle and bone, while Michael's spells kept them alive. Finally, after a long and grueling fight, the last centaur fell, crashing to the ground with a heavy thud. Breathing heavily, the group surveyed the carnage around them. They had won, barely, but the victory felt sweet. As they caught their breath, they felt a surge of energy flow through them. They had gained a level and a new title, Big Game Hunter Shroud. The victory against enemies 5 levels above their own granted them a +1 boost to all stats. Caane, without hesitation, placed his free point into willpower, sensing that his growing power required even greater mental fortitude. They pressed on, moving through the plains, their spirits lifted by the thrill of adventure. It wasn't long before they came across a strange structure, a stone circle, reminiscent of Stonehenge. In the center was a stone aperture glowing faintly with magic. The air was thick with ancient power. Excitement filled the group, and they entered the aperture together. On the other side, they found themselves in a vast, rolling plain dotted with sparse trees. The land stretched endlessly before them, quiet and serene, yet ominous. A message burned itself into their minds. Explore the Centaurian plains, many secrets abound. Tread lightly or risk the wrath of the feral lord. Julius, ever the adventurer, took the lead. With his new treasure seeker ability, he felt a tug toward hidden riches. They came across small groups of centaurs scattered throughout the plains, and after dispatching them in quick, brutal skirmishes, they collected a modest haul of coins and miscellaneous gear. With each fight, they grew stronger, leveling up and increasing their abilities. Caane once again placed his free stat into willpower, honing his mental edge. After their third encounter, Julius found something strange. A lone tree, gnarled and ancient, seemed out of place. Upon closer inspection, they discovered it was hollow. Inside was a skill book, Treasure Seeker, and Julius eagerly absorbed its knowledge. With his new sense for hidden loot, they pushed deeper into the plains, finding 3 more loot caches filled with coins and herbs. Each discovery sent a jolt of excitement through the group, but their luck wouldn't hold forever. As they ventured further, they came across a large warband of centaurs, a grim and ferocious sight. The group decided to follow, keeping their distance, and eventually the centaurs led them to a village. At the center was a massive, withered tree, its blackened branches stretching toward the sky like skeletal hands. Around it were 15 centaurs, and at their head a towering figure, the feral lord, a centaur of immense size and power, level 20. The group exchanged looks. This would be their toughest fight yet, but the promise of riches and titles was too tempting to ignore. Under the cover of darkness, they launched a sneak attack. Julius' arrows flew silently through the air, taking out 2 centaurs before they even realized what was happening. Travis darted through the shadows, his poisoned blades finding vital spots. But the moment their presence was known, the feral lord bellowed in fury and chaos erupted. Aidan charged headfirst into the fray, his sword burning with the power of Milvernus. He met the feral lord in single combat, their weapons clashing with enough force to shake the ground. Michael cast commune with nature, calling the roots of the great tree to entangle the lesser centaurs, while Caane unleashed his newfound vampiric spells. A fear gaze sent 2 centaurs fleeing in terror, while vampiric charm took control of another, forcing it to turn on its comrades. The battle was fierce and bloody. The feral lord swung his massive spear, nearly knocking Aidan off his feet, but with Michael's healing and Aidan's sheer determination, they held the line. Travis and Julius picked off centaurs from the flanks, while Caane's arcane might bombarded the battlefield. Finally, with a desperate swing, Aidan drove his magma-infused sword through the feral lord's chest. The giant centaur collapsed, his body writhing as the life drained from him. They had done it. The group, exhausted but victorious, felt another surge of power wash over them. They gained another level and the title Big Game Hunter 2, a testament to their triumph over a foe, 10 levels above their own. Each member gained +3 to all stats, and Caane once again put his free point into willpower, knowing he would need it for the challenges yet to come. Among the spoils, they found 90 copper coins, 47 silver coins, and a collection of swords, bows, and arrows. As they gathered their loot and took a moment to catch their breath, the group couldn't help but smile. After the intense battle with the feral lord and his warband, Caane and the group returned to town, carrying with them the spoils of their victory and the stories of their adventures. As they entered the town square, the familiar sights and sounds of home greeted them. It was a stark contrast to the bloody chaos they had just left behind, but it brought a sense of comfort. And for Caane, this return was more than just a respite. He eagerly looked forward to meeting with his family again, particularly to share the new knowledge and experiences he had gained. They first stopped at Caane's home, a modest house on the outskirts of town. His father, Stephen, greeted him at the door with a rare smile. Though reserved, his father had always supported Caane's scholarly pursuits. "I hear you've been busy," Stephen said, his eyes gleaming with quiet pride. Caane nodded. "You have no idea." Stephen ushered Caane inside, and his mother, Linda, who had become a skilled clothier, embraced him warmly. His sister, Sarah, was also there, taking a break from her own adventures. She had taken up leatherworking and had been working with her friends on upgrading her crafting skills. Despite her warrior training, she had always had a practical side, and it showed in the finely crafted armor she was wearing, no doubt a result of her work. They spent the evening catching up, exchanging stories about their recent quests. Caane shared his experience with the vampiric castle and their encounter with the feral lord, while his family spoke about their own progress. Sarah had partied up with her friends to take on crafting contracts, and their success in leatherworking had already started to make waves in town. The next 2 days were spent upgrading professions. Caane's true focus, however, was on what came next. He had a meeting scheduled with Farron, the scholar who had been guiding him in the ways of magic. Caane had always been fascinated by the mechanics of spells, and Farron promised to teach him something new, spell diagrams. In Farron's study, surrounded by shelves packed with ancient tomes, Caane dove headfirst into the intricate world of spell diagrams. These diagrams, Farron explained, were the foundational symbols and shapes that made up the fabric of magic itself. Every spell, no matter how simple or complex, had its own unique diagram that could be manipulated, altered, and even improved. Farron laid out several scrolls across the table, each depicting different magical formulas. "Look closely, Caane," he said, pointing to the carefully drawn symbols. "Every line, every curve, it's all part of the spell's essence. You can modify these, change them to create something new, or strengthen what already exists." Caane's eyes lit up with excitement. He had always known that spells could be modified, but seeing it laid out so clearly felt like unlocking a new layer of understanding. Farron gave Caane 2 new quests: scroll crafting and spell research. These tasks would push Caane to not only modify spells, but also to craft new scrolls that others could use. For the next few days, Caane spent hours hunched over ancient scrolls, drawing and redrawing spell diagrams, and his hands moved carefully, copying the flowing lines of Manibolt. A spell he had mastered early on. He wanted to test Farron's theory to see if he could alter the base spell. Through his studies, Caane discovered a hidden inscription within one of the older tomes he was reading. It was a diagram for a skill called Element Controller, and it gave him the ability to change the elemental properties of his spells. With this new knowledge, Caane began modifying Manibolt, experimenting with shifting its elemental energy. Fire, ice, and lightning danced across the page as he adjusted the symbols. Hours passed, and finally the spell took shape, a new creation born from his research. He had successfully created a spell he called Chromatic Bolt, which allowed him to switch between fire, ice, and lightning at will. A notification appeared in his vision. Congratulations, you have gained the title Magic Initiate, +1 to intelligence, willpower, and wisdom for modifying a spell successfully. Caane grinned, feeling the rush of power flow through him as his stats increased. He gained 2 levels in Scholar, pushing his knowledge further. With his free points, he placed 2 into intelligence and 1 into willpower, reinforcing his growing mental strength. With his newfound skill in reading and writing, Caane began crafting his first scrolls. It was a delicate process, one that required precision and focus. The ink he used had to be infused with mana, and the paper was woven with magical threads to hold the power of the spells. As he worked, Caane could feel his connection to the scroll crafting ability deepening. Each scroll he completed unlocked a new layer of understanding that he wasn't just learning how to write spells, he was learning how to research them as well. Farron explained that spell research was about understanding the deeper complexities of magic and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. With his new abilities in scroll crafting and research, Caane felt more capable than ever before. One evening, after a long day of study, Caane and Farron sat in the small library discussing the multiverse. Farron spoke of the thousands of worlds that had been integrated into a larger universe, with Earth being one of the latest additions. Caane listened intently as Farron explained that the tutorial they were currently in was sponsored by the pantheon known as the Hunt. The Hunt, Farron said, is a pantheon focused on adventure, exploration, knowledge, and the pursuit of power. You've already encountered their influence. That shrine you found in the woods? It was a gift from the Hunt. Caane remembered the shrine and the benefits his group had gained from it. Farron seemed impressed by how far Caane and his friends had come. It seems you and your friends are blessed by Vedamore, one of the deities in the Hunt's domain. As you follow the tenets of your chosen deities, your blessings will grow, granting you more power. Caane considered Farron's words. The concept of blessings was not new, but knowing they were tied to a specific deity, one that favored adventure and knowledge, made sense. It aligned perfectly with everything Caane had been striving for. Over the next few nights, Caane continued to push the boundaries of his magical abilities. He slept in the small library, ate sparingly, and spent long hours discussing the multiverse with Farron, delving into the mysteries of the universe. His understanding of magic, the multiverse, and his own role in this vast cosmic game deepened with each conversation. The more Caane learned, the more he realized just how much there was still to discover. But one thing was clear. He had barely scratched the surface of his potential. With the blessings of the Hunt and the knowledge he was gaining through spell research, Caane knew that he and his friends were destined for greater challenges.